Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last day of Entrepreneurship Festival. We're really glad to see you all here. And today we are having an amazing conference about Gen Z in entrepreneurship with Jenk Oz. And I would like to introduce Jenk, who is the social entrepreneur, professional actor, DJ, public speaker, presenter, and social change activist, as well as founder and is SMO of Thread Media social enterprise, which focuses on publishing, consulting, and production at Generation Z. Moreover, Jenk has done 3 TEDx speeches, is very active on Gen Z and entrepreneurship fields. And I would like to pass the microphone to him to maybe shortly present himself as well and start this conference.
Thank you very much. That is very, very kind. Bonjour, everyone. You'll all be very happy to know that I'm doing my French GCSE very soon, so it's very good practice for me to see the website French. Thank you very much. It was a very, very kind introduction. I don't think you kind of left a single stone unturned there, so thank you. You really covered all ground there. Hi, I'm Jenk Oz. For background, I'm 15 years old, and I'm calling in from London, right next to Hyde Park in the Thread offices. I started a company called Thread, as the very kind introducer said. This is a publishing, media, consulting, and production company aimed at Generation Z. The central tenet of which is a website, a digital publishing website called THRED, thread.com. I'm wearing the hoodie. That's how you spell it. And we have 8 full-time employees plus myself, and we reach over 130 different countries. So that's kind of that's what we do. That's what I'm about. Now, given this is an entrepreneur festival, I'm sure several of you are thinking of starting your own companies. And why not? I mean, the cost of starting a company now is the lowest that it's ever been, thanks to a combination of cloud computing as well as social media. In fact, someone did the maths, and you can figure out that the cost of starting one company today is actually 1/10 of the cost that it was to start a company 10 years ago, which you could also think of it as a cost of starting 10 companies today is the same as starting one company 10 years ago, which I think is pretty incredible. Now, look, as a generation, we've all been shaped by 4 things: smartphones, a prolonged financial crisis, a decade of social activism, and now a global viral pandemic. So it's not a good start for Generation Z. Although we're by absolutely no means a monolith, we do have certain traits that appear to be trending across the Generation Z demographic globally. I want today to explore those traits because I think it's really important when starting a business that you understand the demographic, the Generation Z, in order to gain share of mind and then gain share of wallet. I'm going to present the PowerPoint now. Screen share. Bear with. Why is... Okay, right, let's do it like this. Share. Okay, here we go.
And we'll have a Q&A session at the end.
Can you see that? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, it's loading.
Look, let's talk a little bit about who Generation Z is. Generation Z is born between 1995 and 2010. We are the largest generation on the planet, and we make up about 32% of the global population. We're born between 1995 and 2010 generally. That's not an exact number, but for all the statistics that we use, that's the number that we're going to use. Generation Z are digital dependents, okay, not digital pioneers, as a lot of people say. 58% of Generation Z can't be not on the internet for more than 4 hours without being uncomfortable. It's that Generation Z have an average attention span of around 8 seconds. Okay, that's an attention span of 8 seconds, which at first you think is really horrible, but when you think about it, I like to think that Generation Z don't have an attention span of 8 seconds we have a filter time of 8 seconds. You have 8 seconds until we decide whether we want to concentrate or not. But if we decide that we do want to concentrate, then you can have attention for hours on end. We're said to be adapt researchers and fact checkers. While we're watching, given that Google is only a few kind of taps away at any given time, why wouldn't you be fact checking a lot of things? We're competitive, but we're not afraid of failure. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, the cost of failure for startups is now unbelievably low. So to encourage Generation Z to start companies much sooner and much more frequently. We as a generation are worried about the future. Okay, we're conservative and we're risk averse. And we just got a lot more risk averse during this pandemic. We as a generation are very focused on the financial consequences of our decisions. Okay, we want value for the things we buy. We're much inclined to buy one t-shirt for £60 instead of 6 t-shirts for £10 or even 10 t-shirts for £6. Okay, so that's a big shift there. 62% of Generation Z, almost 2/3, worry about how our personal data is being used by companies. But we'd rather get discounts on our purchases or sell our own data, but we want that choice. 73% think that we're able to influence major family decisions, okay? That's not just what computer you buy, but there's actually where you go on holiday, the cars you buy, the houses you live in, and that's what's called a soft or influence spending power, but I'm gonna get back to that in a second. Most important, if Generation Z, and this is, you really have to understand this, we value 3 things: transparency, authenticity, and originality. Okay, gone are the days where everyone in the friend group would dress the same, listen to the same music, do the same things, have the same interests. But now originality within a friend group is much more comfortable in 2021 than it ever has been. I think it's very important that. Where can you find us? Well, Generation Z, where are Generation Z and where are they going forward? The future of Generation Z is in emerging markets. Okay, 89% of the 25 billion Generation Zers worldwide live in emerging and developing markets. Okay, and 1/3 of that alone live in India and China. The 5 largest Generation Z countries account for 44% of the Generation Z population. Okay, that's India with 20%, China with 13%, Nigeria with 4%, Indonesia with 4%, the US with 3%. Okay, and to put actual numbers to that, India has almost 500 million Generation Zers. Interestingly enough, the peak youth milestones are being reached across the developing markets. Okay, Europe is the first continent to have more over 65s than under 15s. Okay, thank you Germany, because what's being led by Germany, given that the median age there is 47. More importantly, North America is going to hit the peak youth milestone by 2022. Okay. For me, I find that India really stands out as a Generation Z country to watch out for and target business. Okay, they scaled the 3 necessary ingredients on a massive scale. Firstly, that being youth literacy rates. Secondly, urbanization. And thirdly, the rapid expansion of technological infrastructure and connectivity. Okay, the internet penetration is up from 4% in India in 2007 to the 40% in 2020. And there's still a lot of room to grow. You have another 60% there. Whereas compared to places like the UAE, Denmark, or Sweden, they're already at 99%. So there's nowhere you can really go there. Beyond India, the same thing applies. There's 3 main scale factors have applied massively in places like Mexico, the Philippines, and Thailand. And they all stand out for high and improving levels in those 3 factors. Last, I think that you have to consider the diversity of the demographic in each country. For example, the US, Generation Z is the largest and most ethnically diverse generation in the US. You can see the breakdown of age, but more interestingly, the share of foreign-born Generation Z is 7%. Similar, yes, to the proportion of millennials. However, 22% of Generation Z have at least one immigrant parent, which compared to the 15% of millennials is a very big difference. Okay, that means that 4 or 5, and 1 in every 4 or 5 Generation Zers has an immigrant parent. Okay, and that influences so many aspects of their life. The food they buy, the music they listen to, where they live, where they go on holiday. It really does have a massive impact. Lifestyle choices. Let's talk about Generation Z's lifestyle choices. we are known for having an undefined identity. Okay, we want to choose how we are defined, not be dictated by past norms. Okay, this may surprise you a fair bit, but the levels of alcohol, meat, cars, and travel purchases are declining from their peaks really quite rapidly. Amazingly enough, only half of US teens even drive these days, and this was happening long before COVID, and it's only increased since 2020. Okay, and that's a massive change because in the past, everyone would say the second the second I'm 17, I want my driver's license, I'm going to drive everywhere. But that's actually a massive shift because now we're actually at the kind of the half mark, which I think is pretty incredible. Another big item is self-care and skincare. Okay, they are both trending up while traditional companies are very much on the decline. Okay, and yes, that is partially pandemic related, but much like the previous trend, this was being seen much before the pandemic and only increased because of it. The only expectation, however, is for men's accessories are actually going up, which I think is pretty incredible, and I'm sure it's actually no surprise. Generation Z, we the only generation that does not want to move to the suburbs or the countryside nearly as early as our previous generations did. And that choice actually resulted in a prolonging of the property rental cycle for us because it keeps prices very high. Okay. Esports is actually watched more often than traditional sports. And 2020 was the first year ever in history where that was the case. And again, not COVID-led because we saw this happening beforehand, but definitely COVID had an impact on the number. 40% of us prefer hanging out with friends virtually than in person. Okay. And I know that sounds quite bad, but why would you kind of see two people? Why would you kind of drive half an hour to go see one friend and then drive an hour back home, where you can go on to house party each night and see 32 friends in the space of an hour and a half and kind of catch up with them all in the same extent that you would have done in real life? So it does make sense, to be fair. These new lifestyle choices have had a massive impact on our consumer habits, from athleisure to entertainment to pets, okay? And pandemic puppies, or COVID companions as they're called, in the UK alone, there's been over 8 million sold, okay? And sold since last March. And I must say, I am in that boat too. We do have 2 husky puppies running around upstairs. This may strike you slightly bizarre, but 42% feel closer to some YouTubers than their actual friends. Okay, 42%. And it's not that we don't have interesting friends, but I actually think that's really big credit to the YouTubers who are now so much more engaging than they ever used to before, and so much more open and transparent and authentic and original, which are those leading back to those 3 things I said. 40% of us don't consider ourselves to be a citizen of our own country, but we see ourselves as citizens much more of the world, actually. And that attributes again to the internet and not being defined by historic labels. We listen a lot more to international music and genreless music, okay, than any more generation before us. We really truly have developed a borderless lifestyle. I mean, the top stream artist last year wasn't American, it's actually Puerto Rican, I think it was Bad Bunny. Which explains exactly why Spotify have actually expanded into 85 countries just last month even, doubling their global footprint now. And they're actually following, I guess, the Netflix model, if you think about it. Look, we've accelerated the drive to omni-channel shopping, and that means a combination of digital and brick and mortar. And shopping remains super important to us, but we're quite disliked large shopping malls. Our default living arrangement is still living with our parents, and we definitely believe that we're going to have to work much harder than our parents did to be able to move out and provide for our own families. One major drawback of this, however, is that we find ourselves being the loneliest generation to date. The largest number of generations that are experiencing poor mental health, and an even larger number are currently in treatment, okay? That is partially attributable to a rise in self-awareness and the willingness to speak out, but I think it's definitely a trend now. Also, it's worth saying that suicide remains one of the biggest lists of people under the age of 40 years old, which, as depressing as it is true. Social activism, much less gloomy. Activism was part of Generation Z's identity, okay? The 2 biggest issues for Generation Z are social unrest. So that includes concepts around kind of equality, equity, rights, kind of LGBTQ rights, women's rights, all the rights, and kind of environmental unrest. So that's climate change, plastics in the ocean. Over 10% of Generation Z and 12% of under 18s surveyed claims that activism was their priority over all options. Okay, and 12% doesn't sound like a large amount, but when you realize that the other options for their biggest priority are things like family, love, and career, you realize that actually these are some really devoted generation. This compares with 8% of millennials and 4% of baby boomers. And that number really seems to only be going one way. This activism will influence Generation Z's decisions across sectors, from consumption of goods to education, work choices, and finance investments. Generation Z's key consumer characteristics are sustainability and product over experience. That has changed in the last few years. Is experience used to be incredibly important, but now we just don't want to leave. The generation climate change activism feeds into its consumption patterns. Okay, this generation is influencing consumer-driven, sustainable activism through agendas such as single-use plastics. Harmful consumer sectors such as fast fashion really are the focus next and will be taken down by Generation Z. 72% of Generation Z think that they can be a part of a movement through social media only. Okay, that's very new school thinking. Companies and governments should not underestimate the power of Generation Z, as we are becoming the digital activists and advocating causes such as gun control, LGBTQ+ rights, feminism rights, the right to vote, immigration, BLM, kind of all of the above. We're fighting for that. These cases have been discussed, but the communication methods used by Generation Z spread the word in an increasingly rapid and collective way. Okay, it's probably a force to be reckoned with, because you really don't want to be, as a company or as a government, you don't want to be on the wrong side of Generation Z with their social media. Activism is now just one click away, okay, earning Generation Z the label of collectivists. Although there are old school activist camps out there who refer to them as quite unaffectionately as slacktivists, I do believe that it is much more collectivism than slacktivism. There we go. Look, social media companies are even subject to mounting pressure from digital activism, and it's leading to huge advertising revenue losses. Facebook was subject to a large boycott involving more than 1,000 brands, including Starbucks, Unilever, Coca-Cola, to take a stronger stand against speech during the month of July. Generation Z was the single most engaged demographic in the Stop Hate for Profit campaign. The next one to face the wrath of digital activism, in my opinion, is fashion. Okay, they face further challenges as Generation Z consumers deal with a combination of COVID, of recession, and sustainability. Okay, these three focal points are going to compound each other, resulting in a massive downwards pressure for the entire sector. Also, despite 34% of Generation Z of apparel, despite 34% of apparel shopping occurring online, its share of personal consumption expenditure fell over 50% in 2020. Okay, significant acceleration of the decade-long trend declining in share for apparel. Corporate responsibility, known as CSR, and personal social responsibility, known as PSR, are very much at the forefront of discussions right now. Oh, sorry, wait. 66% of brands believe that brands, not governments, have the power to drive change, okay? And that has much more to do with the speed and efficiency of the brands nowadays, as opposed to a disbelief in the government. We view corporate social responsibility as an operating system, okay? It's not just a marketing strategy or a seasonal add-on. It needs to be the underlying core architecture of your company's basis. Generation Z want the company that they work for to align with their own PSR, their own personal social responsibility. Generation Z are, interestingly enough, much less focused on the work-life balance than millennials were, and much more focused on company values and fulfillment. But that makes sense, because when you love the company, you want to work for the company, do more hours and watch it succeed. Okay, and they feel more invested than they ever have before. Wait, am I? Oh, wait. I wonder if I've accidentally skipped a slide. No, okay, that's fine. Right. This is just a kind of a really quick slide to sum up the new landscape, okay? And these are the three categories to think about. Activist consumers, activist employees, activist brands and companies. The most important part is that companies need to choose a cause that fits their brand, and it should be for the longer term, okay? Give away what you do well to people in need, okay? And this is a really good example of this, will be things like Vans building skate parks in undeserved areas. Okay, that makes sense because Vans is a skate brand. It's not the same as kind of Vans doing a massive, I don't know, water project to try and eradicate plastics from the ocean, because that's not what Vans do. And in the same way, LinkedIn giving job hunting and CV writing classes to refugees is perfect. It makes sense because LinkedIn is a massive, massive headhunting job platform. LinkedIn isn't going out to kind of donating massive amounts to kind of rural Ugandan charities, because that's just not what LinkedIn does, okay? The other thing to look out for is taking a stand on topics that are considered divisive. Examples of this for the US at least could be things like gun control or abortion rights. Okay, this is going to split your consumer demographic, but you could end up losing quite a lot of business short term, but ultimately it could be the right thing to do to be able to take a stand on a big option, big choice. Right, finance. Let's speak a little bit about Generation Z finance. Generation Z now represent a whopping 40% of global consumers, and 56% actually have cash shaving, okay? As a generation, we much prefer cash cards over credit cards relative to all other generations before us. And we very rarely carry around actual cash. It's actually just a matter of carrying around cash cards or Apple Pay, for example. Generation Z have been in the full-time workforce for a few years now, but Generation Z already have $7 trillion of income, and they have the fastest growing levels of income of any generation now. Generation Z are going to overtake millennials' total income by 2030. It's set to increase 140% in the next 5 years to 17 trillion in 2025 and 33 trillion by 2030. Again, you definitely want a piece of that spend if you're going to be starting a company. Asia Pacific, or APAC, already counts for the largest share of global Generation Z income at 37% in 2020 versus 20% in North America. And it's going to exceed North America and Europe combined by 2035. Now that is a big shift which you really need to lean into. The largest Generation Z markets by income are the US and China, followed by India, Japan, Germany, and the UK and France. Money is important for Generation Z, but we know that we have limited social welfare to fall back on. Okay, when we retire, if we retire to this rate, only 14% of Generation Z expect their banks to have physical branches, and that is all very mobile now. Recently, we've seen a massive increase in the rise of challenger banks such as Revolut, Stash, Chime in the US, things like Monzo over in Europe. As I said, that's been a massive increase over there. Let's talk about the purchasing power of Generation Z population, not in full-time work. Our hard spending total of $440 billion per year, okay? Think about it this way. We have a 1.5 billion people in the developed world, which is 32% Generation Zers. If the average allowance is $18 per week, okay, 52 weeks in a year, that's how you get that number of $440 billion of spending power. However, I was earlier and I said I'd come back to it. The soft or influence spending power of Generation Z is generally considered to be a multiplier of around about 14. Okay, so when you combine the soft spending power and the hard spending power, that gets you to $6 trillion per year of soft spending power, which is pretty incredible, making Generation Z an unbelievably financially influential generation. Now let's talk about the financial influence of the generation, which is set to grow further as the great wealth transfer from baby boomers, so the kind of 56 to 70-year-olds, and the silent generation of the 75 to 90-year-olds begins. Collectively, those two generations own over $78 trillion. And that's just in the US alone. Okay, so think about that massive shift that's going to happen when they pass their money on. Lastly, I'm going to leave you with this one fact. 1 in 3 Generation Zers and Millennials would trust a robot to make their financial decisions, which I think is pretty incredible. Right. Education, workforce, and entrepreneurship. Generation Z students face an unprecedented challenge due to the pandemic, and they're responding very differently than other previous generations would have. For example, the school of YouTube, okay, Generation Z's alternative to university. There's absolutely nothing that you can't learn on YouTube. For example, I mean, how to become a venture capitalist, to how to become a chess grandmaster, to how to become a piano virtuoso. There's literally everything on YouTube. Okay, and how-to videos are actually growing at the how-to videos are the #1 thing on YouTube. And if you think about it, high school numbers are rising, we've seen this, and yet university numbers are still dropping. Yes, I can see this is partially cost related, but return on investment related in the situation is getting worse due to the pandemic as well. And you can learn everything you learn at uni on a 4-hour YouTube video, okay? Globally, entire industries are on track for replacement by artificial intelligence and automation by 2020. And over 800 million are going to be jobs lost globally, okay? And that is not a fact lost on Generation Z. Interestingly enough, 85% of the jobs needed for 2030's economy have yet to be created in scale yet. And this is things like telesurgeons, aquaponic fish farmers, solar technologists, rewilders, garbage designers, and as you can tell, a lot of them are very, very social change driven, which is very reassuring. So, sorry, I'm feeling a bit under the weather this morning. The problem is that modern colleges and universities continue to educate Generation Z roughly in the same way, maybe very slightly high tech, but the same syllabus as they have the last few generations. Thank you. As the last 2 generations. It's the same syllabus, but although the syllabus isn't changing, which we're going to have a massive, we're really in a lot of danger, because if the syllabus hasn't changed, the job landscape has, that needs to account for that. And now you add to that the fact that the gig workforce is growing at 3 times faster the rate than traditional workforce, and there's no slowdown in sight, by the way. Just for those of you who kind of don't know, the gig workforce is another word for kind of short-term contracts or freelance work, as opposed to permanent contracted jobs. So massive examples of the gig would be things like Uber, Airbnb, Deliveroo, are all kind of good examples of the gig workforce. By 2027, half of all the US workers are expected to be freelancers or work gig, okay? And that represents a huge transfer of risk from the company balance sheet to workers, which is good for companies, not good for us workers. Right, now let's talk about young entrepreneurship. I've heard countless amount of times that everyone in Generation Z is an entrepreneur, super entrepreneurial generation, but I actually want to rebuttal that. In fact, Generation Z are not all entrepreneurs. We're actually just practical pragmatists, okay? It's much more of a survival mechanism than a reach for the riches. Traditional entrepreneurs began businesses, employed staff, and followed a standard business model to scale up their company. Whereas for Generation Z, we're much more likely to be focused on sustainable, small wins rather than massive company wins. Think of it as solopreneurs instead of entrepreneurs. We're simply taking our skill set and selling it on the open market, working gig. Be certain that going forward, Generation Z will be very, very focused on entering the workforce and compelling other generations, our bosses, to adapt to them, not vice versa. We are going to be very disruptive to employers, economies, markets, and social systems globally. Right, everyone's favorite topic, food and drink. Over half of generations do not drink alcohol or take drugs at all. This is part of our, as mentioned previously, it's part of our conservative, risk-averse nature, and the fact that we stay home more than any generation before them shows this as well. We're the first ever generation where a majority has some kind of meat restriction in their diet. Okay, those people sometimes refer to themselves as vegan, vegetarian, as I'm sure you know, but the kind of new class of flexitarians, people who eat meat and animal products but sparing, and because they're much more conscious of the environment, and that's actually much more acceptable now. A third of Generation Z say that the word vegan on products makes it much more appealing. Okay, and this is very likely to keep trending upwards. We as a generation consume 550% more non-dairy milk than millennials did. And to that extent, we prefer oat milk over coconut, soy, almond, nuts of all various milks, because it's actually the eco-friendliest. That's oat milk, eco-friendliest. It uses the least amount of water per kind of meter squared of farm, I guess. The good news is that plant-based and sustainable seafood options topped requests from college and university students, and supporters of companies that produce fake and seafood are gaining huge traction. Everything from kind of bloody burgers to fake sushi made from tomatoes, all very, very popular with Generation Z. Having said this, this surprised me, okay? 68% of Generation Z meals happen at, which is great for restaurants because 68% of meals are dinner. Lunch only consists of 20% of meals, and breakfast only accounts for 2% of meals, which is, as I said, great for dinner restaurants, kind of pretty bad for kind of lunch diners, but pretty diabolical for any kind of breakfast restaurant, because that is, as I said, 2% of Generation Z meals. Spontaneity, speed, and convenience. Okay, those are the three things most important for Generation Z. The tech industry is harnessing that very, very well. The growth is up 25% per year, and every year for food delivery businesses. 89% prefer to buy from a restaurant supporting local or environmental issues. And Generation Z will check the Instagrams of your restaurant before going to any restaurant to see it's the sort of place that they should go to. Generation Z really are a bunch of know-it-alls. Okay, we want to know where it came from, how it's grown and harvested, and how it ended up on our plate. Restaurants need to figure out the eco footprint of a meal and put that on the menu right next to the price, because that builds loyalty with Generation Z going forward. We also want to see a lot more cruelty-free options, okay? Not those that are more humane versions of meat, dairy, and seafood, okay? We want to see completely humane versions of dairy, meat, and seafood. We want them to try and find out animal-friendly aisles and grocery department stores, okay? And that leaves us with one big question. How do we feed 9 billion people by 2050? Social media. Everyone's kind of obsession of Generation Z. Generation Z spend nearly 6 years of their life on social media. That's more time spent eating, studying, and socializing combined, which is very, very concerning. 60% of us spend more than 4 hours a day online, okay, with the UK averaging at 10.6 hours online each day. So, well done, UK. We're really leading the tribe there. 66% report using more than one internet-connected device at a time. Okay, that's between a TV on the background with a phone on Snapchat while kind of doing your emails on your laptop. That right there is already 3. Okay. We stream videos for roughly 23 hours each week, which is 3.5 hours a day. But if you think about 23 hours each week, that's almost a day every week. 1 in every 7 moments is spent streaming videos, which is genuinely mind-boggling. We now log onto social media for roughly 3 hours a day, okay, and that's an hour longer than the average millennials per day. 41% of Generation Z men use Twitch, which, if you don't know, is a video platform primarily used to stream video games, but is more and more companies are now advertising on it and using it for kind of different purposes. Generation Z are the most resistant generation to ads, because 52% of ads of teens use ad blockers as opposed to 25% average across all ages. I myself do have a very negative attitude towards non-skippable ads, especially when they're forced on me. 69% of Generation Z will physically do something to distract themselves for the 30 to 60 seconds until the ad finishes. Now, having said this, OOH ads or out of home ads are actually becoming much more well received by Generation Z. OOH ads are things like billboards, movie screens, and public transportation, magazines. Okay, it's much less invasive. It's much more relaxing. You don't have to look at it, and Gen Z are actually finding that they are much more effective as far as ads go. The outcome of these major lifestyle changes have produced some very good outcomes. Okay, 50% of Generation Z volunteer at least once a month. 20% plan on starting a charity. 55% are interning while in high school. 73% want to convert their hobbies into jobs. 62% want to be their own boss, and that's working freelance or gig, as I said earlier. 70% want to start their own business. And even more amazingly, 15% will do it before high school is over, which is pretty unbelievable if you ask me. Look, I think that the most important thing to do if you're starting a company is understanding where we are, how we think, and what matters to us consumers. After all that, everything will fall into place when building a business. Lastly, I just want to say that I'll be sending over some information to the Changemaker network, and that includes kind of internships at Thread Media, our ambassador program, Discord moderator roles, and remote writer jobs. I've kind of just swapped the slide there. All my contact details are there. So if you would like to kind of email, this about Thread Media. If you'd like to read that's what Thread does. Here's the final slide. All of my contact details are on there. All the opportunities of the Changemaker network program. Do either email us, email me about it. If you so want, I'm going to leave this up for a few minutes while we kind of do the Q&A. Thank you very much for listening. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Well, yeah.
Something. So let's see. We have one from, for example, we can start with Elisa. I've been talking with a lot of HR managers, boomers and Gen Y, and that's funny because they all see our generation as moving a lot, but still loyal. Okay, thank you, Elisa. Thank you for the comment. Let's see, which incubator is the best suitable? Well, I think this is more like the question to GEM Entreprendre, right? So feel free to join the meeting village later today, where we'll have incubators, startups, and you can have these discussions a lot. So let's see, any questions from the audience? Maybe we have, can we have questions in live in Facebook? Probably not. I'm personally curious, how did you come across to get interested in the topic specifically about the Generation Z and entrepreneurship? Was there like a starting point where you got inspired or something? Yeah.
Well, kind of as I was starting up Thread, in the kind of early years of Thread, I ended up getting a lot of things about, I ended up having a lot of people kind of asking me for help with, I ended up doing quite a lot of consulting work, is what I want to say, really, really early on. So what was happening is people would come to me and say, you have created a business and you are in Generation Z. I'm making a business. I'm not in Generation Z, but I'm making a business for Generation Z. How do I get Generation Z to like my business, like my website, like appreciate what I do? So, and that was kind of how it all kicked off, because I became the person who is Generation Z and made a company for Generation Z, and other people who weren't in Generation Z and had a company for Generation Z would look to me and say, what's Generation Z doing? So that's kind of how it kicked off. And then I basically did lots of research about my own generation, plus the things that I've seen myself and the stuff that I feel myself. And then when you combine that, you have a very strong kind of plethora of information about Generation Z and our buying habits, which I've kind of tried to condense into a PowerPoint and given to you. So yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, it was really well condensed with all the statistics and
it's very
showing it also visually.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a way to show it. Okay, let's see. Here's another message. By the way, Jenk, thank you for the presentation. It's great to have a motivated person trying to understand how our generation is different from the rest. And plus a student, British spirit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. Elisa is actually coming from Britain, so that's why I think she put
of course.
British spirit. Okay, great. And maybe I'm curious, like, is there any points like with working with other generations that you saw were more difficult than with our generation, for example?
Any
challenge?
Not massively, to be fair. People kind of, because we haven't really had to work with that many other generations. I mean, I don't know. I think the biggest situation of what you're talking about is on our consulting side, we kind of have one of our clients, they've come to us and said kind of, how do we make this better for Generation Z? And they've never been kind of difficult, but there have been a few situations where you've had to kind of change a lot of things, because there's an issue where whenever people always think of people think of the younger generations as younger than they are. So it's a really common thing to see how companies aimed at Generation Z actually are kind of aiming at like 8-year-olds, and they haven't realized that Generation Z is actually now like 25 to 10 years old, which is and that's kind of a massive thing which I keep seeing. And the amount of times I've had to say, this is just like a bit too childish, a bit too babyish, why are you kind of writing in bubble letters? It's kind of like, I've had to say that quite a few times, because that's the kind of main thing. But there's never really been like a difficult generation to work with. But I think kind of the older you get, the longer you think Generation Z is. But yeah.
And also very optimistic. Let's see what we have in the chat. I feel other generations still underestimate the power of Gen Z. Thank you for this presentation and all of the key members you gave. Absolutely, yeah, I would agree. And the question, is the Gen Z the best generation to succeed in developing products and businesses for these generations?
Let me reread the question. Is Generation Z the best generation to succeed in developing products and businesses to generation? Yeah, I definitely think it is, because we have that mindset, as I said earlier, and especially given in the present day, we feel that kind of we're going to have to work a lot harder than our parents did. And you combine the fact that we want to work harder, we're not massive entrepreneurs, but we're solopreneurs and practical pragmatists, and we kind of do it as a survival mechanism, and then add to that and then finally you add to that our kind of financial influence and the influence that we've seen kind of across every sector. I do think that we're going to be the generation who is going to develop the products and the businesses which are necessary for the rest of the world and the other generations as well.
Yeah, thank you. One more question coming. Any advices on marketing without using paid ads? Facebook, Instagram, etc.
Yeah. So I think there's kind of, you can do marketing you can do paid ads on one level, which is literally using Google AdWords and putting your ads onto other websites, which I think is what you're talking about. And then there's also paid ads on things like Instagram and Facebook, where you can sponsor a kind of a post to kind of have a further outreach. I'll ignore both of those because they're kind of both paid ads. And I think that firstly, kind of a spread of mouth works unbelievably well and can never kind of be understated. And also I think that using Instagram and Facebook to present your company from other accounts, so is kind of what I fully credit at the time Thread to kick up from, because we kind of went from kind of like 3 people seeing the website to almost like 3,000, 5,000 people seeing the website in the space of around about a month, purely because every day, and I just had exactly 10,000 followers on Instagram. So what I was able to do is you can swipe up. If you know this, on Instagram, when you have 10,000 followers, you can swipe up on stories and go to a link. So I kind of like every single day I'd be posting a swipe up saying, swipe up to see the website I created, And then that, because you didn't have to pay for that. There was no kind of paying necessary for that. Purely taking a follower base and then saying, I've done this, and kind of trying to drive as much traffic towards your website as possible. Now, obviously, I appreciate not everyone has 10,000 followers. So I think that it is also very easy to say, take a picture of your laptop with a website saying, I just created this, link in bio. It's like not a hard thing to do. So I think using your social media, not in a paid way, is very, very understated. And people need to appreciate that you can drive a lot of traffic from your social media to your website, because when people are scrolling through social media, they really have nothing better to do. So if you provide them with something that it could be quite good fun or interested in, then I guarantee you a lot of people will feel the need to check it out.
Thank you. So you'd say more like social media concentration, and during the presentation you said outside of online.
Yeah.
Maybe as well, but these are paid, obviously. More personal question from Elisa. What is the best feeling achievement you can make in a week?
This week? I don't know. What's my best feeling this week? Do you mean like what was the biggest achievement I've made in any week? I'm sorry, I confused the question. What's the best?
Yes.
Okay. I think my biggest achievement this week is, I actually haven't done it yet, but it will be my piano exam, which I'm doing my grade 8 piano exam. It should be quite good fun. That'll be my biggest achievement this week. My biggest achievement ever. I'm not really sure what my biggest achievement ever is.
There are so many.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I couldn't really rank them. I feel like, I don't know, getting verified is quite cool. That was probably quite a big achievement. Yeah, I think that was probably one of my biggest achievements. To be fair, I think getting verified isn't exactly the achievement. I think doing the things that I did to get up to that point and kind of starting a website and kind of working hard to do that is kind of the actual achievement. But seeing it kind of all resonate in a little tick was quite nice. So what brings you the best feeling in your job? Oh, okay, now I see what you mean. Okay, this makes a lot more sense now. I think the fact that I'm able to a lot of people who I've spoken to are really kind of sad about the fact that they are in a job, for example, no hate on accounting. I think accounting is crucial to the world. But like, well, I've been like, no, they're like, I'm in accounting and I just feel like I can't make that much of a difference in the world. And I feel really, really blessed and happy about the fact that I'm in a job sector which I love doing, and also when it's successful, it has an effect on people and it has positive change. And that is it's not what keeps me motivated. The fact that I enjoy doing it keeps me motivated, but it really does feel really nice to be able to know that the thing I enjoy doing is also the thing that makes a good difference. And I know people, and I was speaking to people actually today on a Zoom call, and they're saying, I want to go into finance. I want to go into kind of bricklaying, but that obviously do what you love. But then they're saying that I want to do that, but then I don't have enough time to be able to make a social change and social impact. So I've had to give them ideas as a way to kind of weave social good and kind of moral good into the kind of everyday aspect of what you want to do for a career. I think that's quite an important job. But to answer your question, that is kind of that's what makes me happy, is that I like doing things that other people will benefit from.
Amazing combination, being passionate about something and having a great positive impact.
Yeah.
I'd absolutely agree. You comment in the education of Gen Z. What are the main tendencies of learning today? And is that amount of information we have now definitely an advantage? Question from Valeria Vandari from Ukraine.
Well, I feel like let's read the question. I think that the tendencies of Generation Z learning today actually, and this is where the issue is, haven't changed at all since the tendencies of millennial learning, since boomer learning, since silent generation learning, since everything learning, and that's becoming an issue because what's happening is we're being taught with the same syllabus. Maybe you've got a new high-tech whiteboard and a nice chemistry lab, but we're taught with the same syllabus being taught as it has been taught to everyone for hundreds of years. And what is changing is the workforce, the work landscape is massively changing. And although the syllabus did well to prepare the generations before us, the syllabus isn't going to do well to prepare us because it's not preparing us for the same thing, but nothing's changing. And I think that's like a major issue that Generation Z are going to have to tackle at some point, because when we go to the workforce, and the part of us already in the workforce of this, but when all of Generation Z is in the workforce, there's going to be a bit of an issue, because we're going to have no clue what to do, because ninth grade biology doesn't really help when you're kind of trying to figure out how to apply into the gig workforce. So yeah. I hope that kind of answers the question.
Great points. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, maybe we should stop right here.
Okay, perfect.
And I'd like to thank you from all the audience, from all the association and university, for becoming a guest today for us. Like, we enjoyed a lot, and you shared such a cool and motivating content, as well as very statistical and actually visual. I'm very impressed, Jenk, and it is a pleasure to listen to you, and I'm sure the audience feels exactly the same.
Thank you very much. It's very kind. Just last plug, do check out thread.com. That'll be very, very kind. And actually next week we're kind of releasing a bunch of different languages. So we have French, Spanish, Italian, Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, Turkish. So if you don't read English, then next week you can read it in that language. So do check it out. That would be very kind. Much appreciated.
That is so cool. I think, yeah, we'll share the link as well with everyone. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. And okay, let me just quickly check in the chat. Yeah, there's thanks, and I don't think there's, yeah, lots of thanks from the audience. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Feel free to join Meeting Village if you feel like, for network, but no pressure.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. See you. Bye-bye. What do you mean?